Hello and welcome back to the Sober Thinkers channel. Again, my name is Michael. Thank you guys for tuning in again with me today. And in today's video, we'll be discussing a video titled, "The Nation Has Failed and Fallen." Again, the nation has failed and fallen. Now in this video, you'll be able to understand the reason why I titled it the way I did, "The Nation Has Failed and the Nation Has Fallen," due to the key examples that I'll be able to give as far as where we were at one point within our nation and where we are now, as well as where we're currently headed. Now, there's an old adage or old saying back in the day when I was younger that stated, "You never know how good you got it till it's gone." And man, that statement could not be more truer at this time and stage in the world. Now, although I didn't understand it at the time or appreciate it as a young man, there was a time that I do remember when things at least appeared to be more simpler and less complex, where you could navigate your way or course with what appeared to be less red tape hindering your and or our rites of passage, so to speak. The time I speak of is when it at least appeared that our nation was both growing and thriving according to the most solid of foundations, most sound of principles, and the most basic of fundamentals. Now, before I go further into my subject matter, I'd like to make a point or two that will serve as sort of a precursor to the points that I'll be making in the latter. So first, let us determine what a nation is, at least by standard definition. A nation is considered to be a large body of people united by common descent, interests, history, culture, and or language, inhabiting a part of a country or territory, also sufficiently conscious of its unity, and lastly, possessing a government peculiar its own. Sounds about right, doesn't it? At least from a fundamental standpoint, which leads me back to my previous point. There was a time when it appeared that the nation was on the right track, both thriving and prospering according to what we as a people assumed we know about such a thing. There appeared to be a time when everyone was in its proper place, both individual persons and collectively as a unit, be it family or any other representation of the like. It seemed we had great, strong, and trustworthy leaders that were driven by integrity, honor, and overall genuine and sincere desire to see the nation thrive and prosper by putting its interests of the people before that of their own. Now, we as a nation were both building and creating things from an innovative standpoint that not only aided and assisted our economic growth, but our intellectual, educational, and cultural growth as well. We took pride in knowing we got out of culture and society what we put into it, and had the stamp to prove it, so to speak. Both pride as individuals as well as pride as a collective. The family unit, which is the most important piece in my opinion, was also intact and thriving for the most part. Both men and women and children alike not only understood their roles but also assumed them both willingly and gladly, ready to play their part and or role. Parents were more cognitively aware of how their children were reared and the various kinds of things they were exposed to both in and outside the home, be it education, teachings of other kinds, relationships, and any other social constructs that could somehow have a considerable impact on their future, be it positive or negative. In this manner, men assume their roles with both honor and respect as protectors, builders / creators, innovators, ready to fight for what they believed in and stand against or stood against anything that threatened it. Based upon principle, they stood together on the concept of no man being left behind, thus lifting each other up. Women, for the most part, carried themselves with a little more dignity, more self-respect, and cared about how they were perceived by others, and thus mindful of their interactions on a social level, or at least pretended to do so quite convincingly. Fathers protected and provided for their young without question, taught them certain and key values that would serve them, as well as transition over to their adult lives, training them in the way that they should go, so that when they become older, they do not depart from it. Mothers also protected, nurtured, and reared their offspring with a certain level of zeal, further in pride, which displayed in her overall attitude and actions. And most importantly, there was a certain level of cohesiveness with this unit between mothers and fathers, husband and wife. And within that cohesiveness, there was a certain amount of love, respect for one another and their situation, as well as the level of commitment to their survival by any means necessary. Both children and young adults coming of age were taught and had it constantly impressed upon them the concept of respect of others, elders, and themselves, and nothing less was accepted by those above them that represented someone of or with any kind of authority, i.e. adults. However, as do all things in time, have been taken what I consider to be a drastic turn for the worse. We are now a nation that appears to be hell-bent on destroying itself from both the inside and out via all types of influences that were not always so prevalent in our society, be it persons or things. This nation no longer takes pride in what I'd say once were the very thing or things that made it great or perceivably great in the first place, which were culture, education, family, and some level of fundamental moral compass, which kept most things in check in its proper perspective. Now it is as if the dam or levee of cultural reasoning, decency, and respect have been busted, with the floodgates now opened up fully to damn near any and every destructive possibility coming to the forefront, as opposed to any real type of restoration. And from both the look and feel of things, we don't want any such thing to take place, especially this generation of people, where reasoning and decency and understanding is concerned. It's quite obvious to me at this point that our nation and its so-called leaders are selling out the nation to the highest bidder, and thus out the window goes our core strengths, competencies, and values. You can both see the crooked and wickedness of these people permeated throughout every facet of society from a mile away, and it's no longer being hidden. Instead, it's being displayed boastfully right before the eyes of the people. Sadly enough, the thing is most don't see at all any of these things and have no idea or clue as to what we're really up against. There now seems to be only an interest in dumbing down the culture and the people of it via all kinds of nonsensical distractions, as well as any other mind-numbing lures that people willingly gravitate to. There's no longer any real innovation that allows and or assists our brains in the process of critical thinking, but instead there's the massive and ongoing influence of so many different things that literally help put our neurological membranes to sleep, i.e. cell phones, endless apps, self-automated systems that require nothing more than the pressing of a button. Nowadays, everybody's in such a goddamn rush and hurry to do any and everything that they no longer even care to take the time to go through the process of doing anything anymore. You can't even enjoy the simplest of things anymore, the pure essence, for there always has to be this overly emphasized reason behind any and everything you do or any and every move you make. We are no longer interested in cultivating or establishing the best talent via the education of our youth or society as a whole. Everything is about just lightning fast productivity and the continuation with little to no interruption. But the saddest breakdown of all is that of our cultural nature, from family down to each individual, male and female alike, young or old, and the lackluster attitude I see in which people display towards some type of dignity, respect, or the lack thereof is becoming disheartening, disturbing, and downright sickening. No one or nothing seems to have any care to have any type of real structure that both govern and regulate how both things and people operate. They have no more boundaries. Both things and people you could at least at one time trust, and you find out you no longer can, nor could you really in the first place in some instances. For there's only self-interest and every man for himself type of mentality present, and no longer a sense of unity and togetherness. The family unit, which is the single most important structure of all in my opinion, pretty much is done. All I see within this structure is a complete breakdown and depletion of every thing needed to both build and sustain it. The father or the men are no longer viewed or promoted as the pillar of strength for his household and or family, the teacher, the imparter of wisdom and or discernment, the head of household and affairs therein, thus lacking the level of respect that is or that it entails without question. Now he is and or has become or relegated to being nothing more than a bona fide placeholder, a follower as opposed to a leader, someone that not anyone need listen to, not even the children. And ultimately, this goes for not only the men of any particular household, but men in general. A situation where the emasculation and effeminization of such has taken place, where you don't even recognize him in his or his rightful place. Next, we have the women and mothers, those who at least appear to be both understanding and of willing to play their roles at one point. Roles that entail the displaying and carrying of oneself with some level of dignity, respect, one that was both nurturing and supportive, both able to aid and assist things for the greater good, from which she also in turn benefited. Now it's a whole new ball game, and in some ways I can somewhat understand the logic behind some of the feelings of these newly arise expectations. But now it's all about self, the I, me, mine mentality. What I feel is best for me, what I want and how I want it and when I want it, which usually falls within the category of now. However, unfortunately, with you as women or mothers, there's no longer a sense of true nurture, teaching, and the impartation of any lasting wisdom, knowledge, training, etc. And sadly enough, neither is there the receiving of such, which is even more frightening, because these things are now considered to be the great undesirables. People care not much to have anything to do with whatsoever. All self-destructive attributes which accelerated the overall breakdown of society as a whole. And last but not least, let's talk about the children, the youth, etc. I don't even know where to begin where they are concerned, but I'll at least attempt to do so with where it all starts in the first place, and that's the parenting. Now, in this instance, the parents have become the greatest influence over the child or children, and is the most responsible for their overall development. Now, however, based upon how I see the youth's overall development and progressiveness on into adulthood turning out these days, and what an utter disaster this has become, from where I see the early stages on into young adulthood stages, the arrow of responsibility only points back in one direction, and this is back towards the parents, even after all of which has been given unto them, which is sad in my opinion. Now, as a young man coming up, I had a certain level of basic structure that I had to adhere to, and deviation away from such wasn't an option, nor was it allotted, because I had both things and people, i.e. adults, who served as a system of checks and balances to assure that I stayed on course. Nowadays, such fundamental principles all but cease to exist, unlike when I was coming up. Parents now seem to just monitor their offspring like scientists in a lab, versus training them in the way that they should go, so when they are older, it will remain with them and not depart. thus teaching them core values and principles that never get old, outdated, or unuseful. Now, we no longer have a fight in the dog, so to speak, or a dog in the fight, so to speak. We're standing up for core principles as a nation with a willingness to fight against anything or anyone that seeks to disturb that fundamental foundation upon which we once proudly stood together as a whole, with everyone being on the same page for the most part is concerned. Now, we all just seem to blow unstably with whichever way the wind carries us, following every little whimsical impulse like small children, without giving any real forethought to what it is we're doing, both on the front end as well as the potential repercussions on the back end. As well as little to no opposition to any such things, which is even scarier. We've traded out stability, both present and potentially future, for a few short-term satisfactions that won't serve us in the long run. In fact, these short-term gains you experience pale in comparison to the effects that will spill over into the future generations, if there's even such a thing at this point. You feel me? So in a nutshell, good people, if we continue on this current trajectory, we won't have much of a nation, culture, and or society left, or it'll be so unrecognizable as it is now becoming that you won't even be able to label it as such. And as harsh as it sounds, you, me, and everyone else will have no one to blame other than ourselves, because we walked and jogged and ran and skipped our way all the way down this destructive path that leads us to where we are now, as well as where we're headed in the not too distant future. So until next time, thanks for tuning in, good people, to the Sober Thinkers channel. We will see you again, and remember, think wisely, think positively, and most importantly, think soberly. Until next time, thank you.